Hi there, John Fluevog again. I'm reading from Roald Dahl's The Twits, and I'm kind of laughing myself silly here, but see if we can get through it. So the next one is called The Roly-Poly Bird to the Rescue. Muggly-Womp and his family long to escape from the cage in Mr. Twit's garden and go back to the African jungle where they came from. Why not, right? They hated Mr. and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. And they also hated them for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. Fly away, birds, they used to shout, jumping up and down in their cage and waving their arms. Don't sit on that big dead tree. It's just been smeared all over with sticky glue. Go and sit somewhere else. But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkey spoke. So they took no notice, and went on using the big dead tree and getting caught in Mr. Twit's bird pie. Then one day, a truly magnificent bird flew down out of the sky and landed on the monkey's cage. Good heavens, cried all the monkeys together. It's the roly-poly bird. What on earth are you doing here in England, roly-poly bird? Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird came from Africa, where he spoke the same language they did. Oh, I've come for a holiday, said the roly-poly bird. I like to travel. He fluffled his marvelous colored feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. For most people, he went on, flying away on a holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing. Did you know how to talk to these English birds? Muggly-Wumpy asked them. Oh, of course I do, said the roly-poly bird. It's no good going into the country not knowing the language. Makes sense, right? Then we must hurry, said Muggly-Wump. Today's Tuesday, and over there you can already see the revolting Mr. Twit up the ladder, putting his sticky glue all over the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds come to roost, you must warn them not to perch on the tree, or they will be made into bird pie. Well, that evening, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the big dead tree, singing out, "There's a sticky, sticky stuff all over the tree. If you land in the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, go fly away, straight up high, or he'll finish you tomorrow in your hot bird pie." Whoa, that was a good song. Well, no bird pie for Mr. Twit. So the next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with this huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single bird on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well, and Muggly-Wump and his family inside the cage, and a whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. It's the next bit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favorite meal. So that very same day, he went up to the birds again, and this time he smeared all over the top of the bars of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. Now I'll get you no matter where you sit, he said. He is just a nasty boy. So the monkeys crouched inside the cage watching all this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted out, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird. It's covered with sticky glue. So is a tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came to roost again, the roly-poly bird flew around the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning. "There's sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or we'll finish you tomorrow in a hot bird pie." That's a good song, right? So the next chapter is Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. Things get serious here. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with a huge basket, not to find a single bird was sitting on either the cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and a whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "Oh, wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twigg screamed at the birds, and next time you filthy, feathery frumps, I'll wring your necks. The whole lot of you. You'll be bubbling in a pot, a bird pie before this day is out. Look at them all hopping on the roof. All right. How are you going to do that? Asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. I won't have you putting sticky glue all over the roof of our house. Mr. Twit got very excited. I have a great idea, he cried. He didn't bother keeping his voice down because he didn't think that the monkeys could understand. We'll both go into town tonight and we'll buy a gun each, he shouted. How's that? Brilliant, cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. We'll buy big shotguns and we'll spray the 50 bullets or more with each bang. Oh, exactly, said Mr. Twit. Lock up the house while I go, and let's make sure the monkeys are safely shut away. Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. Attention, he barked, in his fearsome monkey trainer voice. Upside down, all of you, and jump to it, one on top of each other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit stick across your backsides. Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest child at the top. Now stay there till we get back, Mr. Twit ordered. Don't you dare move. Don't you dare overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to see you in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand? With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. So, next bit's called Mugglewump Has an Idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped back onto their feet and went right up and hang on a second. Flipped back on their feet the right way up. Quick, get the key, Mugglewump cried out to the roly-poly bird, who was sitting on the roof of the house. What key? Shouted the roly-poly bird. The key to the door to our cage, cried Mugglewump. It's hanging on the nail in the woodshed. That's where he always puts it. The roly-poly bird flew down and came back with the key in his beak. Mugglewump reached a hand through the bars of the cage and took the key, and he put it in the lock and turned it. The door opened, and all 4 monkeys leapt out altogether. For free! Cried the little ones. Where should we go, Dad? Where should we hide? Don't get excited, said Mugglewump. Calm down, everybody. Before we escape from this beastly place, we have a very important thing to do. Well, what? They asked him. We're going to turn those terrible twists upside down. We're going to do what? They cried. You must be joking, Dad. I'm not joking, Mugglewump said. We're going to turn both Mr. and Mrs. Twit upside down with their legs in the air. Don't be ridiculous, the roly-poly bird said. How can we possibly turn those 2 maggoty old monsters upside down? We can, cried Mugglewump. We're going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever, and let them see what it's like for a change. Well, how? Said Rollie-Poly Bird. Just tell me how. Mugglewump laid his head on one side, and a tiny twinkling little smile touched the corners of his mouth. Now and again, he said, but not very often, I have a brilliant idea. And this is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me, he scampered up towards the house, and the 3 other monkeys and the roly-poly bird were after him. Buckets and paintbrushes, cried Mugglewump. That's what we need next. There's plenty in the workshop. Hurry up, everybody. Get the buckets and the paintbrush. Inside Mr. Twit's workshop, there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight, stickly glue, all the stuff we use for catching birds. Fill your buckets, Mugglewump ordered. Now we're going into the house. Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door of the house under the mat, and Muggly Womp had seen her do it. So it was easy for them to get in. In they went, all four monkeys, with their buckets of sticky glue. Something's going on here. Then came the roly-poly bird flying in after them with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw. And so now the great glue painting begins. This is the living room, announced Muggly Womp. The grand and glorious living room where the two fearful frumptious freaks eat bird pie every week for supper. Oh, please don't mention bird pie again, said the roly-poly bird. It gives me the shudders. Oh, we mustn't waste time, cried Muggly Womp. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Now, the first thing in this, I want everybody to paint sticky glue all over the ceiling. Cover it, smear it in every corner. Over the ceiling, they cried. Well, why the ceiling? Never mind, shouted Muggly Womp. Just do as you're told. Don't argue. But how do we get up there, they asked. We can't reach. Monkeys can reach anywhere, shouted Muggly Womp. He was in a frenzy of excitement now, waving the paintbrush in his bucket and leaping about the room. Come on, jump up on the table, stand in chairs, hop on each other's shoulders. Roly-poly, you can do it flying. Don't just stand there gaping. We have to hurry. Don't you understand that? These terrible twits will be back any moment. And this time they'll have guns. Get on with it, for heaven's sakes. Get on with it. So there was a great painting of the ceiling began. And all the other birds had been sitting in the roofs, flew in to help, carrying paintbrushes in their claws and beaks, and there were buzzards and magpies and rooks and ravens and many more. Everyone went splashing away like mad. With so many helpers, the job was done pretty quick. Oh, you can have a quick look. Wow. I don't know about you, but I'm not really understanding what they're doing here, but we're going to find out. So the carpet goes on the ceiling. What now, they said, as you all looking at Muggle Womp. Ah, cried Muggle Womp. Now for the fun. Now for the greatest upside-down trick of all time. Are you ready? Well, we're ready, said the monkeys. We're ready, said the birds. Pull the carpet, shouted Muggly Womp. Pull this huge carpet out from under all the furniture and stick it on the ceiling. Onto the ceiling, cried one of the small monkeys. That's impossible, Dad. You'll stick it on the ceiling if you don't shut up, snapped Muggle Womp. Oh, he's dotty, they cried. He's balmy, he's batty, he's nutty, he's screwy, he's wacky, said the roly-poly bird. Poor old Muggles has gone off his womp at last. Oh, do stop shouting such rubbish and give me a hand, said Muggle Womp, catching hold of one of the corners of the carpet. Pull it, you nitwits, pull! The carpet was enormous. It covered the entire floor from ceiling to wall. It had red and gold patterns on it, and it was not easy to pull up an enormous carpet on the floor when the room was full of tables and chairs. Pull, yelled Mumple Womp, pull, pull. He was like a demon hopping around the room telling everyone what to do. But you couldn't blame him. After months and months of standing on his head with his family, he couldn't wait for the time when the terrible Twits would be doing the same thing. At least that's what he hoped. With all the birds all pulling and puffing, the carpet was dragged off the floor and hoisted up to the ceiling, and there it stuck. All at once, the whole ceiling of the living room was carpeted with red and gold. I don't know about you, but I don't really know what's going on here, but we're going to find out. Now the big table, shouted Muggle Womp. Turn the table upside down and put it on the drop of sticky glue on the bottom of each leg, and then we'll stick that to the ceiling as well. Hoisting a huge table upside down to the ceiling was not an easy job, but they managed it in the end. Will it stay there, they cried. Is the glue strong enough to hold it up? Well, it's the strongest glue in the world, Muggle Womp replied. It's a special bird-killing glue for smearing on trees. Please, said Roly-Poly Bird, I have asked you before not to mention that subject. How would you like it if it was monkey pie and they made every Wednesday and all your friends have been boiled up, and I went on talking about it. Well, I beg your pardon, said Uncle Womp. I'm so excited I hardly know what I'm saying. Now, the chairs. Do the same with the chairs. All the chairs must be stuck upside down to the ceiling and in their right places. Oh, please do hurry, everybody. Any moment now, those two filthy freaks are going to come rushing in with their guns. So the monkeys and all the birds helping them put all the glue in the bottom of each chair leg and hoisted them up to the ceiling. Now the smaller table, shouted Muggle-Wump, and the big sofa and the sideboard and all the lamps and all the tiny little things, everything, the ashtrays, the ornaments, and that beastly plastic grome on the sideboard, everything, absolutely everything must be stuck to the ceiling. This is pretty crazy. It was terribly hard work. It was especially difficult to stick everything on the ceiling in exactly the right place. But they finally got it done in the end. Now what? Said the roly-poly bird. He was out of breath, so he tried as hard he could hardly flap his wings. He was so worn out. Now the pictures, cried Muggle-Wump. Turn all the pictures upside down. And will one of you birds please fly to the road and watch to see when the frumpus freaks are coming back? Oh, I'll go, said Rollie-Poly Bird. And I'll sit on the telephone wires and keep guard. And you'll have to give me a rest anyway. So the ravens swoop over. They had just finished the job when a Rollie-Poly Bird came swooping in screaming, they're coming back, they're coming back. Quickly, the birds flew back on the roof of the house. The monkeys rushed over into the cage and stood upside down on top of each other. A moment later, Mr. and Mrs. Twit came marching into the garden, each carrying a fearsome-looking gun. Oh, I'm glad to see the monkeys are still upside down, said Mr. Twit. Oh, they're too stupid to do anything else, said Mrs. Twit. Hey, look at all those cheeky birds still up there on the roof. Let's go inside and load our lovely new guns, and then it'll be bang, 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 and all bird pie for supper. Just as Mr. and Mrs. Twit were about to enter the house, two black ravens swooped low over the hedge. Each bird carried a paintbrush in its claws, and each paintbrush was smeared with sticky glue. As the ravens whizzed over, they brushed a streak of sticky glue on the tops of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's head. And they did it with the slightest touch, that not even the Twits felt it. What was that? Said Mrs. Twit. Some beastly bird dropped some dirty bird droppings on my head. Oh, mine too, said Mr. Twit. I felt it. I felt it. Don't touch it, cried Mrs. Twit, or you'll get it all in your hands. Go on inside and we'll wash it off in the sink. The filthy, dirty brutes, yelled Mr. Twit. I'll bet they did it on purpose. Just wait, I've got my gun loaded up. Mrs. Twit got the key from under the doormat where Muggle-Wump had carefully placed it from the food, and they went in. Oh. The Twits are turned upside down. What's this? Gasped Mr. Twit as he entered the living room. What's happened? Screamed Mrs. Twit. They stood in the middle of the room, looking up at all the furniture and the big tables and chairs and lamps and sofas were all upside down. The cabinet with bottles of beer in it and the ornaments and the electric fire and the carpet. Everything was stuck to the ceiling. The pictures were upside down. The walls on the floor and they were standing on were absolutely bare. And what's more, it had been painted white to look like the ceiling. Look, screamed Mrs. Twit. That's the floor. The floor is up there. That's the ceiling, and we're standing on the ceiling. We're upside down, gasped Mr. Twit. We must be upside down. We're standing on the ceiling looking at the floor. Oh, help! Screamed Mrs. Twit. Help, help, help! I'm beginning to feel giddy. Oh, so am I, cried Mr. Twit. I don't like this one bit. We're upside down and the blood's going to my head, cried Mrs. Twit. If we don't do something quickly, we shall die. I know I will. I've got it, cried Mr. Twit. I know what we'll do. We'll stand on our heads. That way will be the right way up. Oh, I get it. I can now see what's happening. So they stood on their heads, and of course, the moment they stood on their heads, they touched the floor. Their heads touched the floor. That sticky glue that the ravens had brushed on a few minutes earlier did its job. They were stuck, and they were pinned down, cemented, glued, fixed to the floorboards. Through a crack in the floor, the monkeys watched. They jumped right out of their cage the moment the Twits had gone inside, and they and the roly-poly birds watched, and all the other birds flew in to catch a glimpse of this extraordinary sight. The monkeys escaped. That evening, Mugglewump and his family went up to the big wood at the top of the hill, and in the tallest of trees they built a marvelous treehouse. And all the birds, especially the big ones, and the crows and the rooks and the magpies, made their nests all around the treehouse that nobody else could see from the ground. "You can't stay here forever, you know," the Rollie bird said. "Well, why not?" asked Mugglewump. "It's a lovely place." "Well, just wait till winter comes," the roly-poly bird said. "The monkeys don't like cold weather, do they?" "They most certainly don't," cried Mugglewump. "The winters are very cold here." "There's snow and ice," said the roly-poly bird. "Sometimes so cold the birds will wake up in the morning with his feet frozen to the burrow that he's been roosting in. Sorry. "Well, then what should we do?" cried Mugglewump. "My family will be deep frozen." "Oh, no, they won't," cried the roly-poly bird. "That's because when the first leaves start falling from the trees in the autumn, you can all fly home to Africa with me." "Don't be ridiculous, Mugglewump said. "Monkeys can't fly." "You can if you're on my back," said the roly-poly bird. "I shall take you one at a time. We will travel by the roly-poly superjet, and it won't cost you a penny." Such a deal. And down here in the horrid house, Mr. and Mrs. Twit are still stuck upside down to the floor in their living room. "It's all your fault," yelled Mr. Twit, thrashing his legs in the air. "You're the one, you ugly old crow, who went hopping around shouting upside down. Well, you're the one who said to stand on your head so we'd be the right way up, you old whiskery old goat warthog," screamed Mrs. Twit. "You'll never get free. We're stuck here forever." "You may be stuck here forever," said Mr. Twit, "but not me. I'm going to get away." Mr. Twit wiggled and squirmed, and he squiggled and wormed, and he twisted and he turned, and he clawed and he churned, but the sticky glue held him to the floor just as tightly as it had once when the poor birds had been stuck to the dead tree. He was still upside down, as ever, standing on his head. But heads are not made to be stood on. If you stand on your head for very long, a horrid thing happens to you, and this is where Mr. Twit got his biggest shock of all. With so much weight on it from above, his head began to get squashed into his body. Quite soon it had disappeared completely. He sunk out of sight into the fatty folds of his flabby neck. "I'm shrinking," blurred Mr. Twit. "And so am I," said Mrs. Twit. "Help me, save me, call a doctor," yelled Mr. Twit. "I'm getting the dreaded shrinks." And so he was. Mrs. Twit was getting the dreaded shrinks, and me too. And this time it wasn't fake, it was the real thing. Then their necks began shrinking into their bodies, and their bodies began shrinking into their legs, and their legs began shrinking into their feet. And 1 week later, on a nice sunny afternoon, a man called Fred came around to read the gas meter. When nobody answered the door, Fred peeped into the house, and there he saw on the floor of the living room were 2 bundles of old clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, and a walking stick. There was nothing more left in the world of Mr. and Mrs. Twit, and everyone, including Fred, shouted, "Hooray!" And that's the end of the story.